going to call this committee to hold or. Oh. Hey, Jason, Larry.
You need the gavel.
We're going to call this committee to hold order. We've got one item on the agenda. It is a update on the SCORE facility. Penny?
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm Penny Bartley, the director of SCORE. I know I've seen many of you before, so for some of you this will be a bit repetitive, so I'll go through the introduction rather quickly, but please stop me if you have questions. So probably the most commonly asked thing is, what in the world does SCORE stand for? So it's the South Correctional Entity. As I was reminiscing with Mayor Law, we had to name it something. You know, years later, maybe we could have come up with something more creative, but yes, I'm to blame for the name. So when you're asked that, yes, it is me. And if I think of something better, there's no reason why we can't change it at some time in the future, right? So who's SCORE? We're the 7 cities that were the original founding members. So Auburn, Burien, Des Moines, Federal Way, Renton, SeaTac, and Tukwila. It is administered by an administrative board, and we have 4 elected mayors and then 3 city council members as well. And we also have an operations board with the 7 police chiefs and a finance committee with the 7 finance directors. So all of these committees meet almost every month. And so there's a great deal of oversight, and we're very pleased with the involvement that we get from the finance directors and the police chief that keep things running and make sure that we're meeting the needs of our member cities. We also have a number of contract agencies that we're serving right now. In 2015, we have 40 agencies that we're contracting with and providing jail services to as well. Cities as far north as Marysville and Snohomish County down to Tacoma and Pierce County as well. So we are an administrative agency. We are a standalone independent government. That's probably one of the most common misconceptions about SCORE, is that we're a private agency or a for-profit group. So we are not, and we have the same legal status as a municipal city would. And we also have a SCORE Public Development Authority, the PDA, and the PDA really exists just in name, and that's the financing vehicle for the construction of the facility. So we are truly the one and only regional jail in Washington State. As I said, we were started by the 7 agencies, and we serve much more than that. As I said, we have 40 contract agencies. We were never designed to be in the money-making business. Our goal was always to be able to control our own future, be able to manage the jail needs for the 7 member cities, and to be able to take advantage of those unused beds by renting them out to contract agencies. So kind of a little bit of history and going back, how did we ever get started? So in King County, putting people in jail is very, very expensive. And in what is a West Coast phenomenon, here, when somebody is arrested and taken to jail, it's typically the arresting agency that has to pay those charges that are associated with booking and housing that person in jail. And that's when it's a misdemeanor offense. If it's a felony offense, it's the obligation of the county or the charging agency to pay those costs. If you go to other parts of the country, they've never heard of things like that. The jails are operated and paid for out of property taxes or sheriff's fees, or however, there's different funding mechanisms. So what we do here is very different. And in 2001, King County notified all of the cities in King County that they would no longer be able to hold the misdemeanor population. And so at the time, we collectively, and we being the 39 cities in King County, had about 900 inmates in King County Jail that we had to find new housing for. And because we're creative people, we came up with a bunch of Band-Aid solutions, but they didn't last very long. And in 2001, there was not any more space available for us locally to manage the inmate population. There weren't a lot of money available to go out and buy new capacity. There wasn't a lot of support to build a new jail, so we ran out of options. But through the process, we built SCORE, and 2009 was really the year that things start to coalesce and come together, because we were able to locate the site that we built the facility on. I think most of you have been to the jail. I don't believe, Ms. Perez, you have, but you're always welcome. Just come over anytime, and we're happy to give you a tour. This is certainly the outside of the building, and I have to tell you, we hear on a regular basis it's the prettiest building around. It's a very, very nice facility, and we're very, very fortunate that we were able to build it at the time we did, when the construction market had kind of reached a decline, and so we were able to build the project for about $5 million less than we originally thought. So those days are over, though, and now we're really about operating the facility. We opened in September of 2011 with a real limited population for a couple months. But this tells the picture of what that population has done since then. In 2012 is in yellow, and then we go on to the green and the two blues. So 2012, we had an average population of about 350 inmates. Those were primarily the member cities population, so Auburn, Burien, Des Moines, Federal Way, Renton, SeaTac, and Tukwila. Then you can see when we moved to the green in 2013, that number started going up. And then in 2014 with the light blue, and now 2015, we have an average daily population of about 670 inmates. We're budgeted for 650 in 2015, and we're budgeting for 700 in 2016. So our population has essentially doubled since we opened 4 years ago. Our bookings per month, again, this is another example of that, where you can see in the yellow, our bookings have about doubled from where they were last year. Right now, we're averaging about 60 bookings a day. Our highest day has been 110. And so when we have 110 people coming in the door in a 24-hour period, it's a pretty busy place. What that does is our commitment to our officers is to try and get them out of the building in 10 minutes. We want them back here in Renton and back in Auburn and Federal Way and in their communities that they serve. So we always try and make sure that we get those people turned around as quickly as we can. But when there's 110 people, we do realize there's a lag in that time. But that's always our goal with our member cities. So when we look at our total bookings per year, again, if we go back to 2012, we were sitting at about 12,000 bookings, and last year we were just under 22,000, so 21,850 last year. This year we're on track for about 22,000 again. Because we're operating so close to our operational capacity, we're not going to have another huge gain in the number of bookings that we have. We have 802 beds, but our operating capacity is about 700, and that's because we can never fill 100% of the beds 100% of the time. The easiest way to explain that is think about male and female housing. If we have a housing unit that has 64 beds, but we only have 14 women in it, I can't put 50 men in there, so then I essentially lose 50 beds. And so there's always a little bit of net decrease in the capacity. So even though there's 802 beds, most jails consider themselves at capacity at about 85%. So we figure we're kind of at about 675 to 725 is kind of about a 50 bed swing in there, depending on exactly what that inmate population is. If we have that particular day more females, then we may be a little bit higher. We may be at 710, 715, but if it's a day where the female population is down, then we may be at that lower end of that. So there is, every time that door opens, and on a busy day with 110 bookings, every time one of those people comes in, it changes that mix and exactly where the population is. But the story to tell about the bookings is that the bookings have increased year after year, and by comparison, King County Jail did, I think, about 35,000 bookings last year. So we did almost 22,000, so we're operating at about 2/3 of the volume that King County does. And again, this is the booking per month. You can see our bookings for 2015 are actually down a little bit from where they were last year, so the dark blue versus the light blue. But what's important is to recognize that the ADP, the average daily population, that has gone up. So that's usually driven by the length of stay, and even a little creep in the length of stay, a day or two in the average length of stay on the inmates, then increases the volume of inmates within the facility because they're not going in and out as quickly. And I've got another great slide coming up about that. So this is, again, the average daily population. Whoops, I'm sorry. hit the wrong button there, bookings per year. So this is the slide that talks about how long people are in jail. So this actually goes back to 2012 and 2013 data, but the 2014 data is actually very, very similar. So 93% of the inmates are released within 30 days. So we're a very, very short stay facility. The average length of stay for the member cities is about 8 days. So people are in and out, and the biggest percentage of those people, over almost 65%, are released within the first 4 days, so up to 96 hours, and that's pretty indicative of the weekends. So if we see people that are arrested on Friday, they're going to sit in jail Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday be released. So that's why we see this kind of 72-hour to 96-hour window where the majority of the inmate population is released. Also, we have a very high percentage, about 67% of the inmate population that is there pre-trial, so they haven't yet been convicted of a crime. So as a result of that, that also impacts the very short length of stay. We do have a few people way out there at the very end that are staying in excess of 200 days, but as you can see, it's a very, very small percent. It's 1/10 of 1%. So certainly the vast majority of them are in and out very, very quickly. So the top 10 offenses, just like always, we see that there is a large percentage of inmates that come in with charges from multiple agencies. So as I said, last year we had 21,849 bookings. I think I told you 850, so I was off by one. Apologize for that. But there's an additional 14,000 charges that you see there. So almost 70% of the inmates that come in with multiple charges from more than one jurisdiction. So that's very high. DOC offenders typically come in because they're there on a local arrest as well. So for example, they've been arrested on a shoplifting charge, and they also then have a DOC violation. Then we see theft third, DWLS, which is driving while license suspended, assault, DV, thefts, DUIs. These are very, very consistent, the same things that we see year after year after year. The ones that say FTA after them, so if you go top bar says DOC violator, the next one down is theft third FTA. Any of them that indicate FTA, that's a warrant. It's failure to appear. So those are warrants that are issued. So we see that the majority of bookings are for warrant arrest as opposed to new charges. And that's about 59% of them are warrants, and about 30 are then new charges, and then that last 10% are people that are being transferred to other facilities, either on investigative charges, felony investigative charges, or on what we call custody transfers. So those are arrestees that have charges not within King County at all. So perhaps they have a warrant from Whatcom County or from Pierce County or Spokane County. So if a Renton officer comes upon one of those people, they'll still take them into custody, bring them to us, and then we get them transported to King County so that they can be on the statewide shuttle to get back to wherever that warrant was issued from. So recidivism, this is the thing that we count about or care a lot about, is how many of these people are coming back to jail. So when we look going back to the beginning of when we opened in 2011, there's about 66,000 bookings that we have had. Of that, 63% of people have never been there or have been there once. So we only have 37% of the population that's a repeat offending population. We're really excited about that number because when you look at national statistics, especially out of prisons, about 77% of the population reoffends within a 5-year period and is back to jail. So the fact that our number is 37, we're really excited about that, and we're trying to figure out exactly what's causing that. What can we point to and say that's what the difference is?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Penny,
President.
that sparked some curiosity on my part. And it sounds like you're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know if that 37% are individuals that are FTAs, failure to appears, or individuals that I'd be interested in knowing what that population is.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. It's just one of those things that we're really starting to try and evaluate. Because one of the other statistics we've looked at, because the member cities have asked, is where do these people live? Because I think my perception, my assumption was that Renton arrested people from Renton. Usually you don't, with the exception of Auburn and sometimes Federal Way. Most of the other member cities arrest more people that don't live in their city than those that do. The cities of SeaTac and Tukwila have a very high transient population, so we expected that, to find that in their arrest numbers, but we have found that that's the same with the other cities as well. The one consistent exception is Auburn, that always seems to have more arrestees from within their city. So we're trying to figure out, why is that? Why is it that there is such a high percentage of non-citizens that are being arrested? But as I tell you that, I have to caveat that with the fact that we're relying upon arrestee information to develop that. So we don't have a way to geo-validate all the individual addresses and say, oh, this person's really a Renton resident or they're really an Auburn resident. So if they're saying they live in the city, we're accepting that as truth. And there could be a little bit of variation to that. But again, one of those things that we're really starting to look at, and as we mature from a startup agency into an agency that's been around for 5 years, we're just starting to have the technical ability to have enough data to look at and try and answer some of these questions that a couple years ago we just didn't have enough data to be able to make good analysis on. So in my update for you next year, maybe I'll have that for you. But if you want to follow up with me, I'll look at it and see if I can give you some more concrete data.
Okay.
So going to the cost and looking forward, in 2008, when we came to all of the cities, we said, this is what we think it's going to cost to operate SCORE. So we gave you 3 scenarios in the left-hand light blue columns. We said kind of your worst case scenario was probably about $7.5 million. The best case scenario would probably be a little under $4 million annually. And where we thought probably most likely would be right in about the middle, about $5.5 million would be Renton's contribution on an annual basis. And again, this is 2008 dollars. They haven't been escalated for inflation. So then when we look to what is it that Renton has actually paid, you can see those lines come across. And for 2016, you're kind of right in the middle between the best and the most likely scenario. So next year, Renton's contribution, I think, is $4.7 million. So we've kept you pretty close to the most likely amount. Last year, we had a big reduction because our revenue came in significantly higher than we anticipated. And again, in 2016, we are using that revenue to cover all of the debt service for the member agencies. So that is being paid for from contract revenue. So this is our revenue picture again. So 2012 at the bottom, we missed it. We thought we would have much more revenue than we had, and we totally failed that year. I mean, but we learned from those failures, and when we went forward in 2013, we were a little more realistic with our expectations. And in 2014, again, we budgeted conservatively and had about 3 times what we thought would be the revenue. For 2015, again, we increased our revenue projection to $12 million, and right now we're at about $5.6 million through June. So we're a little behind where we want to be, but we think we'll be able to make some of that up. The summer season is usually busier in jail. We see an increase in bookings and the number of arrestees that come in. So the summer will give us a good indication of where we're going to be at in the fall. So the year ahead, again, we think we're operating pretty full to capacity at about 700 is what we've budgeted for 2016. So we need to look at those efficiencies. We need to look at automating some more of our processes. We've made some great progress in this last year working with our data manager and being able to send out reports automatically, not having to do so many manual processes, so that helps us. We have a number of vacancies. Filling our staff attrition has been really hard this past year. We've had a number of new hires. We've hired 34 new employees, but it's kind of this tale of woe across the criminal justice agencies. Many agencies didn't hire. When you looked at the late 2000s, 2008, 2009, many agencies were laying employees off. And now that the economy is rebounding, a lot of those criminal justice agencies are hiring again. And so we're seeing lots of good quality correctional officers officers go on to other careers in law enforcement. And so we're happy for them, but it leaves us with deficiencies that we're having to fill with over time right now. Medical and mental health services are a big challenge for us the year ahead. We're just seeing sicker people. Right now, we have 2 inmates in custody that both have liver cancer, and there's a lot of medical care that goes with them. There's a lot of medical expenses that go with them. So looking at the best way to manage people that come in with significant medical problems, we're seeing, as all jails are, an increasing amount of people that have mental health problems and illnesses. So we're working really closely with King County Mental Health and Valley City's community mental health service providers to try and look at reentry programming for these people and getting them connected to services prior to release from jail, because we think that's the most effective way to try and reduce their return to jail. And also looking at remote video visiting as well. So we have a lot of requests for that. Very often people will have a loved one in jail, and getting to the facility is really challenging to visit them. So we're essentially looking at expanding Skype type services so that people can continue to stay connected with their loved ones, because again, that's a key for them to be able to reintegrate into the community.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Penny,
Taylor.
can you talk a little bit more about your reentry strategy for people with mental illness issues?
Yeah, so we have a number of different things that we're doing. So we received a grant from the Department of Justice in 2014, and so what we have done is that we have hired a specific mental health professional to be in the housing pod to deal with inmates that have severe mental illness. They have an opportunity to then to interact with them on a daily basis and work with them to make sure that they have a community service provider, make sure they're already tiered so that when they leave, they have an appointment, they have a place to go, they have somebody to see. If they're not already in that mental health system, it gives us a chance to contact those mental health providers. As I said, Valley Cities is coming into the facility on a regular basis as well. And we also have an automatic data transfer that goes to King County Chemical Dependency and Mental Health Services on a daily basis so that they can essentially scan our list of inmates. So if they have somebody that should be in one of those systems that isn't reporting, they'll know, oh, they're in jail, so that that case manager can work with us and we can make that connection and hand off on that inmate before they're released back to the community. So a couple things that we're doing with that, again, with the mental health grant, we're tracking recidivism on that as well. And the mental health population is a little bit higher. It's sitting at about 41% recidivism, but again, still significantly below what the national average is. So we're really encouraged by the results from what we've been doing with that mental health piece.
And what about homeless individuals?
Similarly, on the reentry piece, what we've been doing is giving them a resource list. We've also been dealing with a couple community organizations that are working on trying to assist the homeless inmate population in getting transitioned back to assisted shelter. So I know that there's a couple community groups in South King County that we've been working with. So certainly the secret to our success is the staff. As I said, we've hired wonderful staff that are hardworking, wonderful people. I think we originally got about 14 from Renton. Many of them are still with us. I'm happy to say we have had a couple leave, had a couple come back to Renton. So I'll stop taking yours if you stop taking mine. That'll be our little side deal here. But I couldn't say enough about the staff, and really they're the people that make us successful. I get to stand here and take credit for it, but they're the people that make the organization work. And next year we have 160 FTEs. So
Wow.
It's a growing organization. Our budget for next year is almost $34 million. And so what started as pretty small keeps continue to grow, but again, it's a measure of the success and how well we're doing. And finally, is my contact information. As I said, I'm always happy to follow up with any of you or meet with you if you have specific questions.
Any questions from council?
I do, Mr. Chair, I have one question.
Mr. Avoni?
So what's the percentage of the population that is contract versus the member cities?
Yeah, it
What,
fluctuates every day, but it's pretty close to 50-50. Right now, the contract population, I think, was about 300 this morning, and the member cities was like 346, but then tomorrow it'll flip-flop. It's about 50-50.
Well, thank you, Penny.
Yeah, well
Thank
done.
you.
Good work.
And committee adjourned. Committee of whole is now adjourned. We'll reconvene at 7 o'clock for council.
Thanks.